Hey, good evening. It's January 5th, 7:02 p.m. My name is Adam Cron. I'm the chair of the Meadowbrook Planning Commission, and we're going to start our January meeting for Welcome 2026. I hope everyone had the holiday season. Happy festivities. I will begin by taking roll on Meadowbrook present. So Todd Bresci.
Present.
Heidi, Ralph,
Present.
Aaron,
Present.
Jennifer,
Here.
Brian, and David. So David is our alternate, and if we don't have Brian, then David will take Brian's place. So thank you all. We do have a quorum. The agenda was available online. It's at the entrance of the room. Then tonight includes the following updates. It's section 1. Section 2 will be election of officers for 2026. Section 3 is the adoption of the minutes from the December meeting, which were emailed to you last week. And are part of the packet for tonight's meeting. Section 4, for outside presentations, we don't have anyone scheduled to speak to us this week. Item 5 is discussion of business items, which are zoning recodification, recommendations for the 4A zoning district, and discussion of the proposed planning commission and borough council open house that's scheduled for February 26th at 6 p.m. We'll at the end of the meeting take any public comment for item 6, and then item 7 we will adjourn. So I will begin. The first item of business is the chair's update. I don't have any new information as of this meeting to share. So if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take any questions. But otherwise, we'll move forward with the rest of the business. Item B is the Montgomery County Planning Commission update.
Sure. So we're going to be talking a little bit about where we are with zoning recodification later on in the meeting. Beyond that, affordable housing. So kind of working on research and recommendations for the borough. That would be for next planning commission meeting in February. And hope to correspond a little bit maybe with the chair acting from just on findings and just get some feedback on that. But the goal behind that is really to set the stage for this open house that is on the agenda for late February. That's all I have at this point.
Okay, well, more about the open house later in this meeting. That is an important upcoming activity. Okay, there's no further updates or questions. Any questions from the Montgomery County Planning Commission staff?
We have a question. I have a brief update, or at least it's straightforward. One of our former planning commission members passed away, actually late November, but I didn't learn until after the meeting. Nancy Grunthal. She was only a planning commissioner for a brief while. She became ill not long after she joined the commission, and had been ill for a number of years, but she passed away November 26th. So I just want to partner Tom Henry, who was a neighbor of mine, told me, and of course I expressed condolences that I put the commission will to express condolences on the passing of the former. Once a commissioner, always commissioner, I say. So I just thought you all let you know.
Thank you. I'm happy to prepare a letter on behalf of the commission.
Okay, I'll send you a link to her, the announcement.
Again, further discussion. For that. Yeah, we do, and we do have a new mayor of the borough, and you know, plus the election, and so the positions were planned. So, actually, this past weekend, I think. And speaking then of elections, we need to elect officers for the 2026 calendar year. So I guess the way, so we, as a reminder, the offices that we have right now include the chair, the vice chair, the secretary position. We can elect any officers that we choose fit. We don't need to have treasurer or any of the officers, but if anyone wants to create additional structure, so I guess we can have a few minutes of open discussion, and then we have to take nominations. Someone would nominate and second the nomination, and the person would have to accept nomination, and then we can take a vote among the nominees. All right. So any open discussion? We have the right positions, no new positions to create.
Would agree.
We have the right team. The only discussion I want to have is I appreciate you stepping up last year. Your leadership there, I really do. And I think it's been very dynamic what you've been doing. And it's as I always said, it's good to have change in blood, and you've proven the point. You've been a great leader.
It's very kind, Todd. Thank you. However, I'm not with campaigning, so if anyone, I think we are perfectly willing to discuss the merits of any other. We did, you know, there hasn't been, may not have been much discussion about what we should do for this year. So, you know, I'm happy to take. You know, we can obviously, as a body, have discussion about how we run our meetings for the coming year and what our priorities are. You know, any other process improvements we want to have. So, I do appreciate everyone's stepping up. You know, to chip in with the work that we've been doing, and I think we're going to have more opportunities to chip in this year. And Todd, in particular, has been doing a lot of work outside of meetings with staff on, you know, the hardware to try to improve the ordinance to make it more usable, or more user friendly, I should say, through the recodification effort. So the effort that's put in outside of meetings is much appreciated to assist the borough in advancing planning. The other, and just as a reminder, we also do have to, I guess by law, provide a member of this commission on the Historic Architectural Review Board as well. So I've been doing double duty on that. We haven't met actually in a couple months. That's why there's not really anything to report from the HARB, but we do have to have a liaison to that committee, and so if anyone wants to run for that, that's another position that we have to always fill. So, all right, so we'll take nominations for the chair position.
And I might Adam from.
I would second it.
One nomination.
Beat me to it.
Any other nominations? Anyone nominate themselves?
I'm glad we don't have that dynamic here.
Yeah.
Stuck with it.
All right. I will also take nominations for the vice chair. I will nominate. I'll recognize myself, and I would like to nominate, I guess, Rob again, vice chair.
Or second.
Anyone else want to be considered? Further, then I will open nominations for secretary.
I'll nominate Jennifer.
I'll second.
Willing.
Okay, it's been moved a nomination and a second.
Second.
Jennifer to be the secretary for 2026. We have our honorary secretary too, with Emily.
Yeah.
Yes, that's much appreciated that we have a member of staff who attends the meetings, which is a time commitment, and then prepares the meeting minutes outside, which is a great help as well. So, okay, any further nominations for secretary? Any further officers to be considered? All right, I'm going to close the nominations and we'll move to voting then. All right, so the first position is chair. Only one nominee. All those in favor? Nominee Adam Crom for chair for 2026.
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so that's unanimous. The vice chair is Ralph. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Any abstentions? Ralph is elected vice chair unanimously. And for secretary, Jennifer. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed?
It's your last chance.
Any abstentions? Okay, so those are, we'll continue with the same officers from 2025 to 2026. That was the motions were carried. Yeah. And we can continue to work together on the agenda and meetings. Okay, that is the second item of business is concluded. The third item of business is the adoption of the December meeting minutes, which Emily emailed several days ago. We discussed last time we discussed the recodification of the zoning ordinance. They're working on affordable housing analysis for a presentation in February, and the agenda for this year, the upcoming annual report in March, and that we discussed the 4A zoning district, the types of uses, height limits, housing types, driveways, parking, setbacks, and whether or not we are interested in an overlay district for PUD or traditional neighborhood development in the borough. Would anyone like to make a motion to, does anyone have any edits to the minutes as presented? All right, would someone like to move to adopt the December minute?
That we adopt the minutes as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that the December minutes will be adopted as presented. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, the minutes for December are unanimously adopted. Item 4 would be if we had an outside presentation. For January, we do not have any presentations. So we move to item 5, which is business items related to zoning, basically, starting with the update on zoning recodification.
Yes, so we've been working tirelessly through zoning recodification, and we had hoped to have everything ready for you today, but we're still kind of checking each other's work and things like that, particularly around building types, and making sure all the definitions are appropriate. So what we plan to do is to have, I think Todd and I talked earlier today, and we spoke about by the 19th sending you a document for your review. Along with the changes that have been made, I mean, this isn't policy changes or anything like that, but basically we've updated the structure of the code. That's one part. And then the second part has been, making sure that the intent of the original language makes sense. So where there's a definition that's missing, we've added that in. Where something needed to be clarified in the code, we've also added that in. So we'll also, along with the code on the 19th, we'll share kind of a memo of the changes, both structural and with any changes to the actual language. So that's our plan. We are working on this. I understand it's been a long process, but we want to make sure that we get this right for you all. For the borough going forward. So that's kind of where we are.
He was actually working on it while we were voting for officers. I looked over.
So I have to give Todd a lot of credit because over the holidays and on weekends, he's been really working on this. We're trying to get this right. But we're checking each other's work essentially at this stage.
Yeah, so I think a couple of things I'd like to mention about it. As always, we stress this is a policy neutral revision. However, in conversations with our manager over the last month or so, particularly after she reviewed the work in progress, she gave guidance that if there were changes to make that simple, that clarified things that were ambiguous or confusing, that were the intent of the code, we could suggest those changes as long as Adam said, as we provide an inventory. So there's a definition that's missing. We found terms that are used in a technical way in the code that are never defined anywhere. So those are the kinds of things that would
Land uses.
Yeah. Second important bit of news is the borough manager has informed us that this will be a repeal and replace action, not like a long ordinance that has all the changes enumerated, then someone goes. It could essentially just swap this for that. That is what the guidance she gave us. The practical implication of that is a lot of the document we've been working on just says, keep this section. So one of our last steps is we're gonna have to go through and add in the sections where it says, keep this section. So that it is a full document that you can consider and that council can consider.
And all the more important that we get it exactly right.
Yeah.
And that we don't miss anything for pricing.
So that's an extra step. I mean, it's fine. I'm just kind of giving you the updates. And then we may have reported on this too in December, but the borough manager also advised that some of the structural recommendations we were making to the 5A district bordered on a remapping action, which would be different than a revision of the text. She did not want to entertain a remapping action. And so we're working on different strategies for avoiding that, and we'll take the borough manager's guidance on how to do that. And so, as Adam said, the plan is to get you a draft, and even while you review the draft, we will still be working on a few things. Oh, one last thing we're working on is we also have to check, there's this quirky relationship where some land uses are allowed in some building types, but not in other building types. And so that's something we also have to kind of go back there and check. I mean, I think ultimately that's probably something we want to discourage in the future, but since this is a neutral recodification, we have to make sure that's correct. It's something we weren't really cross-checking, and we realized one day we needed to do that. So while you all are looking at the draft in January, we will continue to work on it. We'll be working with the borough manager on the 5A district nomenclature, because it won't change the substance of it. It'll just change how it's described. And so we can do that while you're looking at it. We will continue to verify. There's a lot of cross-referencing inside because this version of the code is going to rely more on hyperlinks for navigation and clarity and ease of use. And so we're constantly checking those. The very last thing we have to do, both Adam and I have met our match with Microsoft Word, but we have to get the formatting straight. There's still places where the formatting is sort of jerry rig just to make it look right, but we don't want to mess with that until the very end. So, so there's still back end work we'll be doing, but our goal is to focus on things that won't get it into a position for you to review it. And that's again, definitions, building types, and land use building type issues. So that's how we do it. And by the way, we're also reporting monthly to the F&A committee. Finance and Administration, I reported to them late in December at their meeting. We had a more aggressive schedule at that time, but the committee member said, get to a point where you need more time. That would be better because we want you to give us something that has problems with it. So we are in touch with the council members on F&A about the work and the strategy and the borough managers there. So in that sense, we're making sure council knows what's happening. That's all I have.
Questions for Tom or Adam? All right, we'll kind of look forward
Yeah,
to
it's not Brad, if you have any questions.
January 19th.
Brad, do you have any questions?
No, I'm just trying to get a sense of the timeline and then we'll be able to move on with it.
Any questions, just let me know or get in touch with them.
Sure.
Or Maggie.
I mean, we were also here for our meeting, so I figured it's super.
Okay, well, I just figured I'd give you an opportunity to ask questions.
Appreciate it. I have no questions this time.
Right, January 19th. Yes, the reopen appeal and replace text. Okay, so then the next item of discussion is the 4A zoning district. I didn't send anything to council for about our, formally about our discussion. We were still discussing it, but.
Sorry, so the 19th is Martin Luther King Day, so you're having a meeting special meeting on Martin Luther King Day?
Oh, no, so this would
Email.
be extended,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, missed the.
that wouldn't be a meeting.
Yeah, so that gives, the idea behind that is to give you 2 weeks to review, yeah.
There'll be a quiz.
You're gonna hide some things in there. So
Easter.
each of your names will be in there somewhere. You have to find it.
All right, so is there any further discussion about the 4A zoning district?
Are you hoping for like procedurally? I mean, we talked about a lot of ideas last month, but are you hoping like to get closer to a consensus about things or other ideas? I don't.
Yeah, I think I think it would make sense if we have a consensus on certain items of recommendation that we could at least share those thoughts.
And would they be included in the new zone?
The repeal and replace,
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, like, probably not.
No. This revision is neutral as to policy, and so any new ideas have to come through a separate process.
So what are the new ideas then? Specifically?
Well, all the things
Can we
we've
go through them?
been talking about the last few months for like.
Well, I mean, I assume it's all of the items in the minutes.
So any substantive policy changes will not be in the new code, so anything we're talking about, on B or any. That's, I mean. Yeah.
I guess I'm just wondering if that makes sense.
Well, that's just the direction we got.
Yeah.
To just get this one out and then make changes later?
Yeah. I mean, we have been identifying policy changes to make, but this was kind of communicated to, I think, residents that this would be policy neutral. But this was strange.
And that's basically why. There's a certain point where we, talk to the manager, should we just finish this and set it aside and make appropriate changes? Or should should it just be acted on as legislation its own? And the answer we got is it should be a clean, no policy changes, replacing repeal.
So
That's what we're doing.
the four, A zone is the green. The purple is the downtown zone that Todd was discussing,
By there.
which kind of has some sort of rules that for different streets have different rules. And then the green is sort of the buffer around the downtown. So on the north side of town, it includes several apartment buildings, existing apartment buildings, as well as single family homes or multifamily in a single house. So,
One big civic institution.
and one church in school, or like a big daycare. So the Presbyterian Church. So on the south side, it's the one block of Elmwood between Narberth and Essex. One block face, it's a curving block face, and it's the end of the street has a significant change in elevation. The majority of the single family homes are part of the historic district. So there's no demolition by right for those homes, for those buildings. There are buildings in 4A that are not considered historic. Some of the existing apartment buildings are not historic contributing resources. And some of the residential structures, but otherwise, the majority of buildings are, I think, considered to be contributing. On the south side, on that block, there may not be any contributing, certainly not very many, but there's maybe one. The 198 Elmwood parcel is vacant. That's where the former Baptist church was, and it's the largest vacant parcel in the whole zone. So what we discussed was that currently, although the 5A district allows two-way driveways, the 4A district does not allow two-way driveways. I think we had a consensus just to allow two-way driveways, 4A as well as 5A. For like rear parking lots. Again, which there aren't very many of. And by the way, that would be conforming potentially with some of the existing apartment buildings that have driveways. There may be bi-directional bi-directional doors. Because there are several apartments that essentially the way they're built is that the basement level is the garage. Usually one garage door. So you have a two-way driveway. We also discussed, well, so that I know that was a consensus item, as I recall. Any other items that we have a consensus on changes?
Thought we had discussed adding the allowance of cottages, row homes, and twins. Not all of those typologies were allowed. I off the top of my head don't remember which ones were and which ones weren't.
Apartments are not allowed.
The cottages certainly are.
I'm not sure where I don't recall where the consensus have landed as far as following the lot sizes of 4B, which is 1,400 square feet.
I think twins are permitted in 4A.
I thought twins were, but not rows.
Yeah. Roads only allowed in 4B.
Board rows are only allowed in 4B, which is the blue area on the map.
Mhm.
Woodbine and Iona, and I guess one side of Hampton. Is anyone opposed to allowing row homes in 4A? Sorry, yeah, 4A. It's okay if anyone is opposed, it doesn't.
It just seems highly unlikely in that you just sort of make row homes reasonable. You'd need maybe several plots put together.
Could be that Elmwood lot.
Yeah, Yeah.
And there are a couple of larger parcels that are not considered in the historic district that should they, for whatever reason, decide to go into redevelopment.
Right.
They are all developed already, so that would be kind of a substantial undertaking, but in the event of that.
in either of those cases, I wouldn't see a problem per se.
So I think there's it's really two parts that one is the typology of allowing row houses and the other is to reduce the minimum lot size of the row. Make sure that it allows for row house size lots.
Mhm.
Or some alternate version of land development that doesn't have such a. In other words, the lot size doesn't work as individual lots for row houses right now.
I mean, you could imagine something like that happening at the bank property in the back. Possibly as well. And that's something that I would love to know if there's any updates on development of that property. So that we could be a little bit more proactive about what's going on with it rather than reactive. That's an interesting kind of focal point, hinge point at the edge of downtown.
Say something here.
Do you have any news?
You should be getting an official application within the next month or two.
Okay,
So there is a plan, it is proceeding, and it'll be ripe for your discussions. And until there is a formal plan, we're not really at liberty to discuss any potential plans. Basically, at the request of the
of course.
sorry. But we've been asked not to discuss.
No, it's good timing though, to understand that we're going to see something soon.
You will be seeing something soon. Well, we believe that you'll be seeing something soon. Things could already come up.
And that parcel is interesting because it's in two different zones.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be somewhat complicated to sort out. And it's historical.
The bank is, yeah.
So, in terms of your question about row houses in that district, I kind of see it two ways that are, they're not opposite, it's just like different starting points. Like, on the one hand, for some of the lots we've discussed, like that corner lot, or the lot behind the bank, those could be fine lots for row houses. And I don't really feel like be a problem with that.
Mhm.
On the other hand, we know there's a 20-unit apartment building approved for that corner lot. And the carrying capacity of these lots is probably more than what you would get with row houses. And so, but I kind of feel like in theory, row houses would be fine because we want to give options for smaller houses and unit housing types. And I support all that. It would frustrate me if a site that has a higher carrying capacity is, and I know there have been people advocating for row houses on that lot where Elmwood is, and I feel like, we get an apartment building there, so. So in theory, yes, I think that's fine, but it would be frustrating to me if we got infill row houses in places where we could actually get apartments. So I don't know where that leaves us.
So you're saying higher density would be better?
Yeah, I think so. But on the other hand, I don't have any objections to giving options for smaller housing units, like row houses.
Yeah,
Less
exactly.
expensive housing units. I think that flexibility is really important. Because I think we all know tendency of zoning is to privilege higher price types of housing types. And so if we can break that pattern, it's good.
But there, as was pointed out, there are too many sites that would be open for development.
So maybe what I'd say, Adam, is row houses would sound good, but I think this package we're working on also should include viable path to denser housing.
A viable path to denser, well, okay, so
I know you're,
guess-
I know a
I
lot of
guess
these
we
ideas.
we could go one at a time, and so I think sort of what you were alluding to in some ways is, well, just how we don't have very much land left as a borough that's, available for additional housing, so how do we get get the most out of what our opportunities exist?
Yeah.
But if we're gonna continue to allow single family homes, then why would we not allow a multifamily home?
Right, that's
Type, yeah, or attached housing, I should say. So
I think all of those options should be on the table. Right?
I do feel like in the big picture overview, like holistically reviewing how we define the dimensional standards of a lot also start coming into consideration. So, reviewing what the maximum, like instead of having minimums, do we set maximums in order to start making it more challenging to consolidate lots to build bigger homes? Do we, but I think that a developer analyzing a site, like the differential between row homes and apartment buildings, I feel like frequently, if they can get enough apartments, they're gonna go apartments as opposed to building 3 row homes. So I think I just like the idea of being able to add another typology into the mix for people to be considering when they're looking at a project.
Well, would it be good to encourage row homes that suggest home ownership as opposed to apartments, which are rentals? Is there any way to distinguish those two? I know it can't, I mean, only by allowing a certain housing type. I mean, apartments could be condominiums, but row houses would tend to be small, more affordable houses.
So I need to we've gotten some emails about this topic, and I kind of first of all, most of the time I've lived in Narberth, I haven't lived in a house. So but here I am, participating in civic affairs. There's something. I mean, if the argument is that, well, it doesn't matter what the argument is. The kinds of housing development we're going to see are really at the margins in terms of quantities. And so I don't feel like even if everything that's built from here on out is rental, I don't think that's going to really destroy the social fabric of Narberth in terms of having people who aren't committed to living here because they're going to move somewhere else. I just don't see that as an issue. And I actually would contend that, there are people here who own houses who participate nil in our community, and there are people who rent who participate a lot. So I don't feel like these generalizations are useful. But so I don't really feel like home ownership is the huge issue that some people feel it is, because the number of units we're building are really at the margin. And I understand issues of building equity, but for some people that's just not where they are in life, or maybe even realistic. Like my son, I don't feel like owning a house is his path to equity. He needs to be able to live in an apartment or in a group type situation. So I don't always feel like that norm is necessarily the norm we should be planning for. So I feel like the home ownership issue is not one that I feel should be central to our thinking about what we want to achieve. Most physical kinds of homes can be owned or rented. I mean, it's the type of the building isn't really the issue. And frankly, globally, what we're seeing is, equity firms buying houses and renting them. So it's not like if you build single family houses, you're preventing rentership. So I feel like it's been right here. And I'm responding to some emails we've gotten recently
How about that?
about that.
So then it really just comes down to form then.
I think so, yeah. And I think
Well, I think it comes down to, the goal for diversity of housing types and particularly to provide some units that are more affordable than others. Because the default, so, I mean, to get down to brass tacks, there's a couple of, of sites that are potentially developable and, probably need to be developed. And to be honest, there's, you have to be able to get a return out of the project. It has to pencil, right? You gotta pay for the land as well as all the development costs. And so the challenge there, right, is that if we have, say there's a single family typology, you need an expensive house to pay for the development, pay for the land, pay for the construction, and so that entitlement. Alternatively, we need many units to pay those costs. And the advantage of the second approach is that it could be larger number of units at a lower price point. So, and I think there's a synergy with our other planning objectives in terms of, they brought up before that, the borough's population is like 10 or 15 or 20% lower than its peak population was when it was first developed. And that, and obviously for commercial development, it's very changing landscape for business. So, but having that higher density is probably beneficial to business, to be the walkable density in the trade area of our downtown and our commercial zones. So, the parcels that are, in this zone, there's the back half of the bank that we discussed, that maybe a proposal that comes in for that, or maybe not, we'll see. That's currently a parking lot. And I think the part of the challenge with the density discussion, or really any of these, is the parking. So, we want off-street parking, we discussed the driveways. The challenge is the site planning aspect and the number of parking spaces and how they're accessed. So for row houses, right, our traditional row house neighborhood doesn't have very much off-street parking, I don't think, on the lots, right? Right. So, I'm missing something about like other parking arrangements, but then so we're not going to have garage doors in the front of the lots and so on. Anyway, so the bottom line is that if we wanted to do that apartment building, the 20-unit apartment building is no longer approved. I think we talked last time about the zoning changes that would be required to reapprove it. And that was the height limit, for example. Right, the way we measure and calculate height limit has changed. And it's kind of esoteric. It's almost hard to follow, but it has to do with where you draw the line on the lot to measure what the height of the lot is, basically. And I think that of all of the sites that are currently available, 198 Elmwood is the most likely to be redeveloped as apartments, I guess, or as housing. Single family homes. And the key issue for that is that the site is sloped. So I actually think that's an advantage because it would allow us to tuck the parking under the building, which is how the other apartments in for A are currently designed, right? So if we look at like Essex Manor, right? You have a garage underneath a two-story apartment building. So you basically have a parking podium underneath the building. And it's tucked into the lot, and you can see the building is roughly 6 feet above the sidewalk level. But this is a flat site. The challenge with a sloping site is that the good news is like it becomes easier to have the parking tucked under the building. But the bad news is the height limit wouldn't allow the 3 stories. So I mean, Essex is only 2 stories, but the problem with the 2-story project is it doesn't give enough units probably to be a viable project. And there are other apartments similar to Essex Manor that use that same sort of site concept of putting the parking underneath. So anyway, so if we allow the row homes to, I forget, Todd, if we have to, we require the row homes to provide parking for it.
Yes. I think it's one per dwelling.
Yeah, when we're doing, but you can get a parking credit for your curb space, you have enough curb space.
But we only have 3 parking spaces probably on this curve. Maybe 4. So I guess maybe we can get 4 row homes, but we can also get 4 twins. And basically, we don't get that many out of the curve. For the apartment building, we need to get something like 20, or as close to 20 spaces off street. But so I mean, basically, we went through last time the changing the height limit to be not so strict as far as how we measure the base of the building, because it doesn't work for the actual sites that we have. They end up being 2-story buildings, basically. Or you have to build the residential underground, which is where the parking would be. The driveway we discussed, and we also discussed last time dispensing with visitor parking. That was the other change. That we now require a couple of parking spaces for visitors that tipped over to where they couldn't provide parking for apartments. And I thought we had a consensus that was not worth keeping the visitor parking requirement so close to downtown.
I recorded the minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we amend the minutes to say that was in the commit? That was, it's not in the minutes here. Anyway, I thought we did. But what I said was, I think yes, we should allow row houses, but we should also make sure there's a good path to building apartment buildings. And what I recall, I'm looking at the minutes here, was a discussion that rather than engineering the rules of a whole zoning district in regard to one site like this one that's peculiar, that we may be better off creating like a and I think we asked you to look into the legality of this, like a PUD type structure that would allow alternative site solutions for crazy sites like this one that are rectangular and they're sloped and that may be easier to come up with good solutions for the 20-unit building or whatever than trying to write generic code, and that we could think about as a solution for maybe there's a half a dozen sites around the borough where if we could engage in that kind of process, like a site-specific plan process, we could maximize the way those sites are developed without having to write generic zoning code that maybe hopefully solves the problem. So my answer to the part of the thing, like the height, and you've also talked about the setbacks of being an issue on that site, that I think I would hope it could be, those things could be addressed both through a plan development process than us trying to re-engineer the code for a district. Yeah, I mean, I agree those things should be solved, But I don't know the generic code is the way to solve it.
For lots that are kind of strange like this, I mean, you guys have a section of your code that tries to address, five-sided lots. This, but yeah, PUDs, I haven't really seen them, certainly in Montgomery County, but in Pennsylvania, I mean, they are something that's an approach that's taken elsewhere. To me, it does seem in this case a little bit like spot zoning.
It's Pennsylvania, I think it's called T&D, traditional neighborhood development. I did, I haven't made a ton of progress, but Media Borough has the T&D overlay on Baltimore Avenue. And it's from one end of the other to the other of the borough, all of Baltimore Avenue, and there's actually two of them. There's the original T&D 1, and then there's a T&D 2 that is in kind of if my understanding is correct, which is debatable, I think it's like kind of the gateway area that we had that presentation.
To the west.
Yeah, we had Jason Duckworth's project from Acadia Land. As a reminder, that was there was a rehabilitation of some historic row homes that were not necessarily in great shape. The construction of new townhomes that were attached on that side of the street. There may have been a commercial structure involved as well, or there was some adaptive reuse of like a gas station in that great gateway area to become like a coffee shop or a bar or brewery, those kinds of things. And then I forget if it was an auto dealership or a repair shop or something like that, but the large site across from the townhomes was redeveloped with a 5-story apartment building with a considerable number of apartments. And we heard from Jason that the reason it worked was it was a sloping site, sloping away, sloping down from the street, that allowed for putting a parking garage at the rear of the building and sort of underneath the building to get enough parking. But I want to say it was like over 100 units in that one building, the lofts. But that was a large loft apartment building. And that was done through the T&D. All of that was done through the T&D. And so the zoning code basically has design guidelines, and the T&D says, the project needs to be consistent with the design guidelines, but those are not available online. So we can get a copy from the borough. We could also try to get a copy of that development application to see how it was actually set up. And then the other thing is we talk about setbacks. That T&D zone on Baltimore Avenue, the standard setback is 5 feet for a 2-story building. And then the bigger the building gets, the more the setback is. But it's just not clear to me if that's the setback at the ground or if they're talking about stepping back. But the higher the building is, it's definitely for sure the upper floors need to be set back. And maybe the entire building is set back 5 feet for each additional story, beyond 2 stories. So there is a sort of, in part, moving closer to the lot lines for smaller buildings like townhomes. But and then I think for 5-story buildings, I think it is a 25-foot setback. Also, it does say you can come into the setback by 10 feet for 20% of the building, provided that it only runs like 1 story less than the top floor. So what they're basically doing is articulating the massing of the building. You can come closer to the street if you, in essence, they're doing the elm that we have here in Harbor, breaking up the mass by chiseling off the parts of the facade. So we could try to find out more about the T&D overlay and the process used to do it. But I guess I just want to underscore, like Jason's project was a huge project with over 100 housing units, I think. And the for sale product was high-end, very expensive homes. And the amount of paperwork has to be commensurate with the size of the project. So I don't know that a special, like, I don't know that this law justifies the level of effort that we're talking about here. That's why if we don't change, if we, the safest course of action for the owner is probably to put up several multi-million dollar homes. That, you know, the most recent house that's going in on Elmwood is it over $2 million listed? Yeah, it's a large house on a large flag lot, but a single family house is now broken the $2 million threshold for new construction. So we would get several potentially $1 million or multi-million dollar singles. There's clearly a development path for that type of housing. Probably for sale, probably owner occupied, but as a, you know, supposed to renter housing. The only way to compete with that is to probably is 30 or more apartments, which may sound like a lot, but that's only really, you know, similar to some of the existing apartment units that we have. Small apartments to get that number, which would be by definition almost more size. So anyway, and the challenge there, as we went through last time, is that, you know, in order to put the parking in the rear of the lot, we have to put the building in the front of the lot, which is why the setbacks. Right now, basically the zoning follows this 25-foot setbacks, which is roughly what the buildings on this block face are at, more or less. You know, something like that, close to 25. They may be slightly less or slightly more. The thing about 190 Elmwood, you mentioned the five-sided lot, is that it's somewhat unique in that it slopes dramatically more than 10 feet from top to bottom. And it is not a rectangular shape. So, and it's not part of a continuous house line. Like, you cannot continue the house line on this parcel because of street curves. So from a strictly urban design standpoint, I think, you know, that an apartment building would be appropriate because there's an apartment building across the bridge, there's an apartment building across the street. So it's essentially, and the rest of Narberth Avenue is actually built to the sidewalk on the other side of the bridge. So it's continuing this downtown tight streetscape. It's not violating the house line because there is no house line actually on this block face because it turns a corner. And then for the height definition, I think, you know, what we should be doing is measuring the height from the sort of where the entrance of the building is, if you will, or the base of the first floor, which would be at the high point of the lot. Because if we measure, you know, the average perimeter of the lot, which slopes, you know, 12 or 14 feet to the rear, we end up only being able to build a two-story building. Basically. The average height would be lower. So on the lot, whereas what we should do is tuck the parking into the bottom of the building. So that's how we would get apartments, which we probably wouldn't get no matter what we do with the zoning, to be honest. But that's the only way to compete, I think, with the $2 million single family house. And we can get, like, you know, maybe either 4 or 6 twins, or if we also talk about duplexing the twins, again, the parking becomes the problem here. Or the idea of the T&D overlay is that perhaps instead of subdividing the parcel into regular lots, orthogonal lots, we subdivide the parcel such into you own the structure, but the driveways are held in common. The parking is held in common in order to get a parking pool. But, you know, at most you're looking at like 8 to 10 stacked flats or apartments or what do you call it, stacked, you know, townhouse duplexes versus you know, 30 apartments. So what I had suggested last time was that we, for the zone, for the entire zone, that we simply say if there is an existing house line, you must continue the house line for 25 feet with your project. And if there's not an existing house line, that we change the setback to like, 12 feet from the curb or 15 feet from the curb.
Why do you say there's not an existing house line?
Because the house line will, if you extend this line, I think, let's see if we can draw it. Right, like we say this is the house line
Yeah.
and we extend it, it continues into the railroad.
Well, no.
No, the line,
It's parallel to the street. I mean, it's not. The
well,
line doesn't
yeah, so
continue just because it curves.
well, no, the setback is parallel to the street, yeah, but the line is straight. That's what I'm saying, like, the visual line as you're walking up the street, because the street bends, you can't see around the corner. So right now, we continue the setback at 25 feet. But it's a new line of houses.
The setbacks are not.
But the
The
20
setbacks probably are 25 feet. So that's-
Yeah, the 25-foot setback is basically a garden setback you could have. Your squash plants and things.
So where I take issue with this is I take issue with changing the rules in the whole 4A district. And because really our goal is to come up with options for this site.
Right.
That's what I take issue with. I don't disagree with the kind of view you have of how the site could be developed. But I feel like the path of changing the rules for the whole district is the wrong path. Is that who knows what other issues that will open up. I think it would be better to find a way to develop a mechanism that can be more tailored for lots like this. And if it's not the TAB, maybe, we actually did have a conditional use process. We did have a special rule that basically applied just to this site. And there was a civic institutional building there. For civic institutional buildings within a certain distance of the train station, these rules apply. And that was like the only one. So it feels to me that there must be some mechanism that allows us to get exactly the outcomes you're talking about. It doesn't require rezoning the whole district.
But I just want to correct the record to, I don't want to interrupt you, but we are not rezoning the entire district in any dramatic way. And it's no different to discuss the setback than it is to discuss whether we want to add row houses, because that's the change to the type of building that you can build. So, the practical discussion, like what I'm trying to outline here is that the steps that we're discussing would be universal to the district and they will do no harm. As a practical matter, there is only one large vacant parcel in the district, but that's not a matter of zoning, that's just a matter of what's been built. And you can tear down Essex Manor and redevelop it. So just as a hypothetical, Essex Manor is currently 2 stories. And if we change the height limit rules, right, you could convert Essex Manor into a 3-story building, provided that if you can get enough parking spaces to meet the zoning code, right? So probably what you would do is continue to park under the structure, possibly behind it, but you would add another floor. And what I was saying with the house line is that on Essex, you'd have to continue the house line that exists for 25 feet, but then you could build closer to the street after that 25 feet to get more housing, essentially. Because again, if we look at, I don't think anyone's going to redevelop Essex, but just for the sake of argument, let's just look at the parcel, because that's an example of a building that is not protected, right? So if you look at, so this is not spot zoning. It's not writing rules that wouldn't work anywhere else in the district. It would work. So you can see Essex is exactly what we're talking about for Elmwood, right? It has a rear surface parking lot, which is what you need to do to make the other Elmwood site work. Essex more or less continues the house line of Essex Avenue, today, it's probably right around 20 feet or 30 feet from the parcel line, right? So we'll call it like, it's 29 feet, something like that, which is similar to what the houses are built at. I don't know exactly where the parcel line is. Actually, this one is, we'll call it 20 something feet, right? So the house line is at 20 something feet. And they continue that house line. But if this structure were to continue that for 25 feet and then move closer to the sidewalk, I don't think it will change or hurt the character of the street at all. And my evidence for that is that when you look at throughout the borough, now, although there are very often very typical building lines, there are many exceptions to those lines that cause no problems. And here's an example. As you come down Hampton Avenue, there's a single family homes set back 25 feet or so from the lot line. When we get to the Presbyterian Church, it drops to like 10 feet. And, basically, if we followed the zoning rules, we couldn't have this building in this form. It would be smaller, probably lower too. So, and this is another 4A structure. This one is presumably protected. But you see my point. Like, so what I'm proposing actually matches what's in 4A today in every way. That driveway is the same thing. You can see along Windsor, all of these garages that are just opening off of Windsor. The driveway to Essex Manor is a two-way driveway. I think there's no other way out. So all we're really doing is codifying 4A the way the borough is. And the reason why 198 can't do this is because the current zoning, the height is an issue. But again, the rest of the borough that's flatter, what they did is they essentially dug out the basement and piled the dirt in the front yard. And so you get that rise from the street, which is probably the spoils from the lot itself, and then the basement is the parking garage. Anyway, so I don't think that what we're doing is changing the form of the city. It's not changing the code. It's not changing the uses. It's actually correcting, in some ways, the issues that are blocking us from having more buildings like the Essex Manor. And then, in order to have a project, it's got to have enough units to compete with the $2 million single family home for the same piece of ground, which is hard when we're talking about like small apartments. You need a lot of them. And you got to pay for the parking too. So, and again, I'm gonna hit this point. There's a couple of lots that, in theory, are not historically protected and could be developed. So it's not just 198 Elmwood. And it is. There's also the back of the bank that would stay as a famous now. So, but if we take no course of action, that's almost certainly that these will be, could even just be one house, but probably two or three.
Do you know how many units there are in Essex Manor?
No.
And how big that lot is compared to 198? I'm just curious. I mean, it certainly makes sense to allow that kind of structure.
I think it's roughly comparable in size lot.
So I don't there's that apartment-esque kind of building at Dudley and Windsor. Have you looked at that one?
Sometimes people ask Google to delete their houses.
You got it there.
This one here is across the street.
The one that's at the corner. It says that's pretty small building.
Yeah, but I'm wondering, Adam, if you'll study that at all, would that yield more under what you're proposing, or is that kind of
Does that have parking?
next step?
That's parking next to it.
I mean, this building,
Is parking under it.
Doesn't it?
I mean, I think that in terms of the form-based code, right, you might be able to put, if, I don't, is this a parking area, this paved area?
I believe.
Yeah, so I think, you know, if there's a way to put more, like if you were to redevelop the entire parcel,
Well, sure it's not a historic building, right? So that's, I guess that could be redeveloped.
I'm guessing it's not historic, but I don't actually know that. So
So that's
let's,
the question.
pardon?
What would be so you're limiting your discussion just to the 4A, but some of these are just general rules. Is there a reason why these wouldn't work for the borough as a whole? I mean, if this is something that is limiting the possibility of denser buildings on a variety of lots through the borough. You know, like it's like the visitor parking requirement. We're not just proposing to remove that for one district. We're saying, well, maybe we just remove that requirement entirely. So would some of these changes be more suitable to be, well,
Well,
throughout the
certainly,
borough, if they're technical changes?
certainly the parking requirement could be removed.
So I mean, the kinds of things you're proposing seem general. They're not like useless. Like you could say, okay, we only think row houses go into these districts. But if you're talking about the way that the housing line flows or two-way driveways, it's not clear to me that that is something that's, you know, a typology that you only find in one district. It seems like that might be a change that would be better for the whole borough if you think it's a good idea.
Well, there are places where apartment buildings are more concentrated, and 4A is one of them. But there probably are some places where it would be weird to have an apartment building.
Yes, but
that's-
we're talking about driveways and parking.
I think that, Council President, the issue is that we are working with the zoning map as it's given to us without changing it.
Sure, but I mean, you could make some of these changes to all of these other districts, just locally. I mean, I'm saying it doesn't, some of these things don't need to be by district, they could just be a recommendation that we think this rule should be changed for everything. You know, that might solve the issue of how many, you know, well, there's only 3 or 4 lots. Well, throughout the borough, there are several lots for lots. If you think it's a good idea, then potentially it could just be changed throughout, unless you think that would have some sort of dangerous repercussions.
Well, I think we already offered, you know, recommended changes to the 5B district.
So I'd say that some of that was around height and, you know, number of stories and use. So I think that those might vary from district to district. I mean, it's kind of the point of having zoning districts is that you don't have 5-story buildings next to single family houses everywhere. Right? So the changes that you recommended were mostly about height. And there's a recommendation for height and a recommendation for like mixed use, the definition of mixed use building, right? But these recommendations seem more technical that you're talking about. And I don't see necessarily a reason why they wouldn't apply to the whole borough. If we're going to apply it, right?
Well, I think that the specific, I guess there's a couple of changes that could apply. But the changes being discussed have mostly to do with how the parking is provided within the concept of how to subdivide or develop it, and then also the way the height is calculated, and then the setback lines. So the map is the zoning map. Today, the yellow areas have some apartment buildings. There may be there can be apartments that don't conform to zoning that they were built previously. They're not allowed anymore.
Or there's one corner of the building, or one corner of the borough that is zoned for apartments because that's where your apartment is. Even though it's completely surrounded by single family housing, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that might look like a spot zoning, but one could also make the argument that it's a dense intersection, and that's a larger structure holding that corner. whether or not you could rezone part of the borough to be higher density than it currently is, would be changing the map, right? If you want to change the level of development that could be accounted for in a zone, or the types of dwellings that could be built in a zone. I think, isn't the restaurant a non-conforming use today on Montgomery?
Probably. I mean, I guess I would say, like, you're talking about changing how you calculate the height from the street level and all that. I would find it difficult to do that only for one district. Like, if we're gonna calculate how you determine height, it's gonna be the same for the whole borough. We're not gonna just have that for one district. So, I mean, that's a very technical change, right? It's like, okay, if the lot is slanted, then we're gonna measure from one portion. I mean, it doesn't seem logical to me to have different rules based on different districts. So that's one where I would say we definitely want to roll that out throughout the borough if you think it's a good idea to make a change. I feel like some of these items are similar, are comparable. There are things that if we're going to change it in one district, they probably should be changed throughout the borough because we think it's better that way.
The height one might be a borough-wide change, and the being the larger the lot is on a sloping site, the more the way we calculate it just doesn't work.
Right.
Because it's saying, what is the perimeter of your lot? If you have a large lot, you can't build on the high part of the lot anymore. So,
Makes
Yeah.
sense to me.
And then the setback rule, I think, even though we're only talking zone by zone, which I do think is somewhat appropriate, I think the form-based principle is that rather than have the teeth all at different setbacks, we want to have at least somewhat of a harmonious build-to environment where we have rows of buildings. The downtown, the goal is to have the buildings built to the sidewalk or close to it. And in the residential districts, is to have a harmonious, building line. But I think, as we've discussed, in practice, we do change, especially at corners, where that line is. And so, if you have a large lot that maybe you're responsible for setting the new line, as long as you tuck into any existing line, so that you create that harmonious continuity. But like saying that the 25-foot setback is what we should continue to require, again, it basically means the only thing you can build is a single family home in the middle of your lot. Because you can't build a row house, you can't put the parking behind, you can't build a apartment building, because the lots aren't big enough to do that. These generous front lawns are intended for very large lots. So you go to Marion Station and there's these enormous lots, and they have enormous lawns, pools and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of these lots are just not big enough to support that. All right, so we had a consensus on the parking, like not having the visitor parking, the driveways. I forget if we had a consensus on just lowering the number of spaces required, because it's currently 1 per unit. And I think 20% of the units that are small apartments would require half a space. But we had discussed lowering it to 0.7 spaces per unit, just to again, it's a game of inches, but it's how many parking spaces can a lot provide, and getting credit for your full street frontage, or whatever the highest number of street credits you could get is. The height limit issue is somewhat technical, so we may not have a perfect technical summary, but I think that, my understanding is that for sloping sites, the way we're calculating it basically lowers what you can build versus the flat site, which isn't fair. And probably not the intent. And you can't, like we said, even the project that was already approved once, it cannot be approved with the current height limit. And we had a consensus to allow row houses, recognizing that the parking remains a problem. And then we can continue to research alternate subdivision ordinances, which would be like the TND.
Yeah.
Which could be an overlay over large parts of the borough, essentially. And then we did not have a consensus on changing the setback or recommending, a smaller setback. But is there anyone that would like to speak in favor of smaller setback? Besides me?
Well, I mean, I think the overarching theme that we have here is that in downtown collar districts and locations where higher density seems appropriate, we're trying to make more favorable conditions for those developments to occur. And so while there are some technical issues that may be, borough-wide, we're really trying to focus on the idea of how do we promote density in places where it seems appropriate to promote density. And that seems to be around downtown, along Montgomery Avenue, and places where you would expect to see it. And where it might happen based on some future developments or some consolidation of properties. So, whereas the default was always, or has been over the last couple of years, to make properties for single-family homes, we've had a few examples where a single lot was turned into 4 homes rather than keep it as a single home or make 2 homes out of it. So I think that trend continues is to try to come up to some kind of conditions where we promote higher density.
And I think that the examples you're giving of buildings that may be built closer to the sidewalk are civic buildings, and they've been there a really long time. I don't think that necessarily should dictate allowing buildings to be built closer to the sidewalk.
I don't mind the concept of having a building be required to follow for a specific dimension and then be able to change in conformance, because a large enough lot, the building could step out without having an impact to like the overarching character of the streetscape. But on a smaller lot, if you, let's say it has to be 25 feet, the chances of having a lot larger than 50 feet in the middle of a block that would allow for the building to step out, nobody's going to step the building for a 10-foot section or something, unless they're just doing some sort of decorative bump out.
One of the things I was thinking about is examples Adam was showing us. They're really about corner lots, not mid-block lots.
Mhm.
And there may be, even in the 4A district, the things we're talking about might be more applicable on the corners than the mid-blocks.
Well, I guess I'll share one more thing, which is the Heidi's point about civic is true in some cases. I don't know that it's a rule, but so this is where the church that was on 198 Elmwood, how it was situated on the site, and it predates almost the entire built area. Right? So it came first when there was no houses and apartment and house lines. There was a water tower, I believe, at the top of the hill. That's not there anymore. But you can see it it's built. It was actually built in stages. Where I think the part that was nearest to the corner is the newer part of the church. But you can see it was built about, I think, 10, 15 feet back from the sidewalk. It's built relatively close to the corner. It doesn't continue any house line of anything because there were no house lines. And it was fine the way it was, in my opinion. I'm just it's totally fine. So if it was this building was going to be converted to an office building and instead it was demolished. But the occupancy of the building, I think in some ways is not really material so much as what Heidi was talking about Jen was talking about with is that if you have a large lot, you can set the context of your project. Whereas if you have a small lot, you are part of an ensemble, right? So if you have a narrow lot, you just continue the pattern on either side of you. But if you have a very large lot, you have enough canvas to create your own pattern. You can see that the Woodside Court Apartments, they do have that 25-foot setback by zoning from Narberth Avenue. But they don't continue the house line. They actually have an even deeper setback from, I forget that's what street that is. So the borough is, yeah, the reality is there's not, like the zoning is, it wants to make everything a cookie cutter, but that's actually not how the town's built. It has lots of buildings that don't follow a particular setback rule. Whereas I think the outcome, more important than if it's a 25-foot setback or a 15-foot setback, is really this core question of, is it a $2 million house of three of them, or is it a 30-unit apartment building with a lot more people paying a lot less each to live here? And people can have their own opinion about like whether it matters one way or the other, but it is different. And the zoning is clearly not making it very easy to build the apartment building, whereas the zoning makes it quite easy to build the single family house.
I'll add the question, somebody had asked about 115 Dudley, I just looked it up, it's 7,800 acres, or not acres, square feet, give or take. So it would not have enough square footage to be an apartment building. And for a multi-family house in Troy, it's 3,000 square feet per family. So you could only have 3 units.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Sorry, 2.
Yeah, no, that's I think the first.
So it's just,
Okay.
in the conversation of,
The 4A is not a very big district, and that's gets to this whole point of like it is the collar around downtown. So doing away with all of this like low density suburban, it's in some ways what needs to happen is like the zoning should be more like the downtown and less like a rural large lot area. And what we have today doesn't really conform in many cases to the zoning.
I think the problem comes up though, I mean, I think that apartment building, at the corner of Essex and Windsor is low rise. It's not a tall building, and that helps it not be overwhelming. I mean, the Elm is huge. We wouldn't want to have the Elm on other sites, regardless of how far it is from the sidewalk.
Well, the Elm is 4 stories, right? But
I guess as someone who is still relatively new to living in Melbourne, I have never found the Elm to feel imposing as I walk along the streetscape. I feel like contextually does it feel larger? Yes, but it's never felt imposing or out of place to
But
me.
it's in the downtown. It's amongst other 3-story buildings. So that's why it feels like.
well, but I think
But I think that within the context of the 4A collar district, it all sort of is.
Yeah, the 4A is really a transition from downtown.
That's the point of the 4A. It should allow more density, but not as dense.
But I mean, like if we look at this apartment building, which is admittedly on a slope site, right? The upper end of it is 3 stories, and the lower end is sort of 3.5 or almost 4. And it's in a single family context. This is another sort of I really personally think the character of the borough is not the fussiness of all Victorians on a block or whatever. It's actually the fun aspect that there's all different shapes and sizes in many cases on these streets on the same block. Like you have twins, you have singles, you have new, you have classic, and then you have several apartment buildings mixed in with large single family houses. I don't know if this one has any parking or not.
It does.
It
On
has
the other
like
side.
parking in the basement.
Yeah.
But that building is small at the front, so it doesn't feel overwhelming.
It's not a continuous.
Narrow, yeah.
Yeah, I agree that is what it is, but I don't actually think it's material. The reason it has the slot is to get the number of units around a garden court, and it's as someone who lived in a garden court building for a number of years, this is the absolute smallest garden court I could possibly imagine. Like, it's clearly, like, and then the setbacks are all around it are extremely small. With the exception of the front yard setback, which is probably again, that 25-foot zoning, standard setback, so.
I mean, in that example, though, you end up with basically two pieces of building that are almost the same size as a house.
Yeah.
So it works on the street front pretty well.
And in some ways, the reason that they're that size though is because it's essentially 2 house lots. Literally, this site is 4 single-family house lots. And I would not be surprised if this is like 30 or 40 apartments instead of 4 singles. If you were to write a zoning code from scratch, I don't think you would. What this looks like is very permissive zoning, and we keep trying to come up with very prescriptive zoning, and then we don't actually match what the town is. So, I mean, I can't express to council that we just need to continue discussing it, or we don't really have a consensus, but I do think that this like personally as a resident of Elmwood, like I don't think that building apartments on this block face on any of the parcels and any setback and any massing would in any way diminish the character of the surrounding neighborhood or any of the other blocks.
Let me go back half an hour. Personally, I agree with you. What I don't agree with is rezoning the whole district. Okay, so that's the difference.
But why? Why don't you?
You've since I made that point, you showed us some other buildings like at Windsor and Essex that, okay, plausibly that could be a site where something bigger could be. And so then I asked, so is this a condition? Maybe that applies to corners, right? Maybe in the 4A district, the corner properties can sustain a little more density than the mid blocks can. I don't really feel like I don't feel that kind of full scale saying, well, you know, that building between Essex and Dudley, that looks fine. So why don't we just create rules that might allow them anywhere one day? I don't agree with that. It works because it's a one-off, not because it's everywhere. And it works because all around it are smaller houses that really create the context. So I would say if you're talking about 4A, I'd be open to exploring the idea about whether corners could be appropriate locations for these bigger buildings, but not necessarily the whole 4A district.
Is anyone uncomfortable with saying that we have a consensus that a corner lot could be built in that manner? Because it's different. So Todd, I think we could at least take your suggestion to start with that nobody disagrees with the assertion that the corner lot should allow that. I think they continue to think that you're making the argument that somehow that allowing apartment buildings in the rest of the green area would diminish somehow or not be appropriate. And I just am not there. I think that any of those green lots could support an apartment building, period. The only thing about it is that most of them have an historic house on them. And so they're not necessarily, and they've already been subdivided. So the only way you can get a large lot is to consolidate, and you'd have to do tear downs. That's not likely to happen. There could be a natural disaster or a fire or something like that wipes out a whole block. And if you were to start out, or multiple structures, and if you were to start over again, you'd face the choice of just putting back a single family house, which is a perfectly, normal choice. But you could potentially consolidate and put in an apartment building. And I personally, whether it's a corner or not, I don't think it would matter. That's why that's why I brought up the mid block apartments today that we discussed. Well, they're not that much bigger than a house and so on, but I think that's the condition that prevails. So we could just report where we're at with 4A, which is the corner lot, and that probably we should Does anyone want to speak in favor of calculating that, like, that we should not maybe revisit how to calculate the height to go back to closer to the way it used to be at least? Because again, I thought that you can't permit the same building that we permitted 5 years ago or whatever.
Yeah, I was trying to find out, I was trying to read and see if I could figure out when that was changed. And unfortunately,
What is the difference? Can you
unfortunately,
explain the difference?
It's just, it's whether you measure it, I think, the building line or the lot line, something like that.
right now, the way it's written is on 4A, 4B, and 3 districts, you measure at the perimeter of the lot. And you take the average height at 2-foot intervals.
That's only in those districts.
Yeah, and then we have 5A, 5B district, the measurement is at the building line. Whereas the other districts is at the perimeter of the lot.
Why would it be across the board?
I think that, I mean, I remember when we changed that.
Yeah, so it really comes down to height, what you're gonna allow for height.
Well, Todd had asked several months ago, what is the barrier to just re-permitting the thing that was already permitted once? And this is the barrier.
No, we should rethink that, sure.
And the condition gets worse because the new bridge is actually raising the corner of the site, is my understanding. To, they want to have a modern bridge and it's going to be higher. And so you're actually going to have even another foot or two or more increase in height drop across the lot, which if we're measuring at the perimeter of the lot, is lowering the height of the building another foot. That kind of thing.
I think that was changed actually to help developments on sloped lots, because if you take the whole perimeter of the lot, then that negates where you place the building. But if you place the building on the high part of a lot, in the 5A and 5B, then you can take advantage because your height is measured from where your building is, right? It doesn't take into account the lower parts of the lot. I don't remember exactly what the change. That was only changed for 5A and 5B. So I don't remember what the change was for 4A and 4B. I don't remember what it was, whether we changed it or what the change was.
Or whether it just stayed what it was.
I just don't recall. But I do know we did change from 5A and 5B, and I think we felt that by taking the measurement at the building perimeter, that allowed on a site with a slope to take advantage of the slope better than if you did the perimeter of the site, because then you would artificially be bringing. If you could arrange for your building to be in the higher part of the site, then you could take advantage of that height for the height of your building and tuck the parking under it. Whereas if you did the measurement from the perimeter of the lot, you would automatically be pulled down. I think that's was the reasoning.
The 4A, see the 5A and the 4A are the core of the borough, the commercial area, the main streets, around the train station, literally like this Elma block is the block facing the railroad. And personally, I think that the small buildings don't work. Like you need big buildings to stand up to the railroad, right? That's big open space. And so, if you look at our zoning map on the screen, we have the 5-story massive building just over the borough line in Lower Marion, the Thomas Wynn Apartments. As you go off the bike path, there's another massive apartment building. The Cross Wynwood Road is a massive, massive garden accord project. And, we, in some ways, like we're landlocked. We have very few building sites, really. And so if we want to get the tax base out of the borough, like to generate the revenue to pay for the services, pay for the infrastructure, we need to use our parcels wisely, and we should be putting the density next to the railroad and next to the downtown. And that means That means allowing the height, for example, it means allowing bringing the setbacks. I mean, I agree with Jennifer, I think the elm is exactly a good thing for the downtown. In fact, what it faces across the street is the surface parking lot. The other side of the street is what feels inappropriate and unfinished because nothing's holding the sidewalk and nothing's creating a streetscape. So we are at time, and so we can report like, well, we're moving in the direction of saying, corner lots probably, are the most appropriate for apartment buildings and density. We've identified how many of the buildings we have don't quite follow the rules that we have in place for lot size. We probably should do away with the large lot requirements for the housing types. So we can build small cottages, we can build row houses and potentially smaller apartment buildings as well, like very small apartment buildings. It's not likely to happen, but and that we aren't complete on it. And I hope maybe just that we can identify this issue of the height limit calculation, seemingly not working with sloping sites when in fact that may be the best place to put parking underneath is on a sloping site. But because we're including the lower part of the lot, it's bringing down the height of the building because the corner of the lot is low. So it drags everything down. And I personally would put a tower at the top of the highest point of the borough because that's where the water tower was. And I think it'd be fantastic if we still had the water tower. It'd be a total landmark. I liked having the belfry, the church tower in the corner, and even with the rest of the church gone, I think if we could have saved that, that would have been special. I'm gonna just close this for now though, and then if that's okay, and we'll move on to just 5C, which is the February 26th, 6 p.m. is the tentative date for an open house here, I think in Borough Hall, potentially, with somewhere big. And the idea is to present on what we've covered in the zoning. And so we'll need to work on some graphics, maybe with MCPC staff, but potentially contribute to that.
Yeah, you could have several stations with different boards. Yeah.
And we don't know if council will have their own things they want to present at that time or not.
I mean, we'll come back and forth, right? So you recommend some things to us and we've sent them back to you. So I think the proposals that you've been talking about are mostly what council has in mind. So I think it'll be, the things you've been talking about are also what we've been considering. So if you want to present it as joint between planning commission and council, that's fine, but it'll probably be the same topics, is what I'm saying. So however you'd like to, but let's talk. But
so we'd like as many of you to come as you can. It's not a meeting of the commission, but it's a chance to interact with the public and have an open house and talk through these issues and hear from the public, what their thoughts are, try to capture that. So it's a group effort. And then I'd like to meet in small groups between meetings to work on the materials that we suggest, the drawings and it's envisioned as kind of a poster session. If anyone wants to build a scale model for borough, that would be really cool, but it's probably not going to happen. So, any other comments for the workshop? People want to?
Does anyone have a 3D printer?
Yes.
Reach out to a university, propose that they do a project, the architecture school based on one of our lots, and then have that studio build a model of the borough as part of their project.
It should be fun. It should be interesting, and I think also that with respect to Montgomery Avenue, we do need to try to meet with somebody to talk about presenting a vision for Montgomery Avenue. Let's talk. Okay. This is the major commercial corridor in the whole borough. So, what I'd like to do is maybe meet with. Are there any volunteers to work on this workshop? That's someone that wants to meet specifically to help develop the materials. Jennifer? Anyone else?
No.
Ralph? Okay, so at a minimum, Ralph and Jennifer will meet. I'll help you coordinate that. And if anyone else wants to meet, we can form a second committee and we can divide and conquer work also with that.
Yeah.
I also want to throw out a part of this agenda for the open house too is Adam's research and presentation on affordability, cultivating and planning.
Talking about to a certain extent, but yeah, we'll definitely have some figures.
And we can, Adam, we can present the demographics of the town.
Yes.
Yeah. So how many renters, how many owners, legal ownership, income, whatever. Very survey.
So what is this workshop being billed as? What's the,
Well, there are gonna be a lot of run through the door, and then we just sort of get.
but how are you gonna inspire people to come?
The question, you've already advertised it, right?
Yeah,
I think
Is that what it is? It's about zoning changes?
you know, Borough Council is considering zone changes. Here are some ideas, here are some buildings that, we'll highlight that, you know, could be built under zone. We are considering zoning changes that would allow for more density in parts of the borough. Here's why. Give us your feedback. You know, here are some buildings that were built recently in these places, or that were built recently in the borough. Here are some buildings that are in the borough that we couldn't build because of our current zoning. You know, here's what we're thinking of changing it to. Give us feedback. I mean, it's to allow the community to see, have a chance to interact less formally than in a meeting with public comment. And to hopefully, you know, interact with us and with y'all, some of y'all. You know, that's our goal for this.
So then I guess we better know what we're talking about.
So I think for the February meeting, we should probably have topics.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I'm imagining a lot of the things that you've been discussing now being presented to the public, as well as Adam's thoughts on.
Yes, I mean, definitely affordability, demographics. I think height is such an interesting discussion that we've been talking about so much, so why not explore that in different districts?
I think one thing we should look at is why that change, what that change was that was made a few years back. And maybe if I can figure that out, and figure out why the change was made. I mean, I can go back to my correspondence with council. I mean,
Which change, the
like,
two
Fred,
stories?
like 5 years or so, maybe longer, we in very technical ways the way the heights were calculated. I just, this is what Adam is referring to when he
Yeah.
said,
The building heights for the,
and I don't know what the I don't remember what the change was or why, but if I find the letter that I wrote to council about it, that will probably explain what the change was and why. So I just need to go back and see.
it may have been related to 230. I mean, I feel like 230 Howard has a snitch lot.
Some of the changes were related to that, but according to what Adam is reporting, we also changed the heights in the 4A district too. I vaguely remember this all, but I just don't know. So I'm just gonna go back and look for the records and see.
I
So I,
think Jim Spear might have a good idea, because I remember him talking
he was
about
on the commission.
yeah.
So we can look that up. And Adam, I think Ralph made the best statement, like, I mean, our aspiration is to find ways to encourage more housing types and denser housing where it feels right. But I feel like where we get stuck is on what are the tools we have in front of us to do it? Is it changing a whole district? Is it changing part of the district? Is it changing a building type? And I just feel like if we could get more information about, you understand what we want to achieve.
Yeah.
But like if we could get more technical help on the paths to achieve it, I think you know, we were talking about parade and like as we looked at different sites, I began to think a little differently about it. So I also kind of feel like just looking at, I mean, I don't feel like debating the need for trying to find a change is the point. I think the point is like, where is it appropriate and what are the tools? And so, like Adam, as you were speaking, I was looking at the map and seeing other sites where it might be appropriate, but I just feel like we need to look at them and think it through a little bit, because it, you know, I hadn't thought about it very much. So I feel like also identifying other sites in the 4A we could look at as like, would it be appropriate here? Like, the streets across the street from the train station. I think the buildings that were recently renovated, expanded. Maybe this would be a great place for apartment building in the day. So that would mean changing the way we look at it. So I feel like there's more to talk about there if we just look at more sites.
All right, so we'll see if we can get some by next month, further analysis of the other sites in 4A. Which I think will be illuminating. Okay, well, we'll break out for the February meeting. I hope you all put on your calendars and attend. We'll see if we might want to be prepared for other similar planning topics. That could come about downtown or whatnot, and so on. The last item is number 6, public comment. And do we have any public comment? There's nobody online. All right, no comments. We will move to number 7, which is adjournment. So I'd like to take a motion to
I
adjourn.
think our bylaws say we cannot adjourn before 9.
I don't think
Now that's a bylaw where we can work on.
We're really close, so I think we could.
yeah.
Well, that being the case, I will move to adjourn.
Second.
Great, it's been moved and seconded. Will you please vote to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourned.